The SEC is wide open this year. There are no favorites in this conference this year. And I'm here to give you guys my 2024 SEC preseason power rankings. Where are Texas and Oklahoma going to rank entering their first year of SEC play? Where's Alabama going to rank year one under Kalen DeBoer? I got the answers for you. First, we're going to start off with, you guys know who's going to be number one, man. Vanderbilt. I love Clark Lee, but it just isn't working out with him at Vandy. Anytime they get some good players that produce at a high level, they always end up transferring out to greener pastures. This is the toughest job in college football. You don't have a lot of resources. The school is more committed to academics than they are to football excellence, despite playing in the toughest conference in college football, where the majority of these programs emphasize football and prioritize it over everything. Vanderbilt, they got a lot of questions. You don't know how good your offensive line is going to be. You're lacking talent at wide receiver. We don't know how good you're going to be defensively. It's just, Vandy's not going to be a good team this year. They come in at 16. Mississippi State, I got them at 15th. I think they are the second worst team in the SEC. They have Jeff Lebby as their new head coach, who comes from Oklahoma, previously being their offensive coordinator. He overhauled this team through the transfer portal. They got a lot of transfers who are expected to be starting for them this year. Some of them they got in the early transfer portal cycle. Some they got in the later spring portal window. You got Blake Shapen as your expected starting quarterback this year. And this offense could be a little bit dynamic because they do have a little bit of talent at wide receiver. So if Blake Shapen plays well, offensively, they could be a little tough to stop. Their offensive line, though, most of their starters are going to be coming from the transfer portal, and it's really hard to have a good offensive line when you have guys who don't have a lot of chemistry or experience playing with each other. An offensive line, like we saw with Colorado last year, isn't one of those things where you can just assemble a bunch of guys from the portal and put them on the field and it works. It takes timing, it takes chemistry, and a lot of experience to get high-level offensive line play. They got a few guys on their front seven on defense that are really good, but their secondary doesn't look too good. As a matter of fact, their secondary probably is the second worst in the SEC, slightly above Vanderbilt. It's going to be tough sledding for Mississippi State. Jeff Lebby's first season in Starksville, they come in at 15. Arkansas, I have them at number 14. Sam Pittman has the hottest seat in America. Outside of Billy Napier, it doesn't get any hotter than the chair that Sam Pittman's sitting on right now in Fayetteville, Arkansas. You know things are looking dim for you when you decided to hire Bobby Petrino, bring him back to Arkansas and make him your offensive coordinator. Then you lost two of your best players on your team last year in KJ Jefferson to UCF and Rocket Sanders to South Carolina via the portal. And you replaced KJ Jefferson with Trenton Green, who comes from Boise State. And I've seen a good amount of him at Boise State because I love watching Mountain West football because they play so late. He's a massive downgrade from KJ Jefferson. You know, he's not the most natural quarterback. When you just watch him throw the football, his mechanics look a little off. And Bud Petrino definitely is a pretty good offensive mind, but I don't think Trent Green's going to be that good. To be a decent quarterback in the SEC, you got to be a serviceable passer. And I don't think you're going to get serviceable quarterback play out of Trent Green, at least when it comes to him throwing the football. On the ground, he could be pretty dynamic. He does have really good size. He's a really good athlete. Arkansas is severely lacking talent at wide receiver. The offensive line should be improved this year. Their defense was pretty good last year, but they could have a drop-off this year because they lose a few guys to the draft. It just is a complete mess down there in Fayetteville, Arkansas for Sam Pittman, and he possibly is going to be one of the first coaches to lose their job this season. Florida comes in at number 13 for me. You can make the argument that Florida should be a lot higher. They bring in a top 5 transfer portal class. You got some pretty good finds via the portal. You got Joey Slackman from Penn. You also got Elijah Badger from Arizona State. You pair him up with Eugene Wilson. You're going to have one of the better receiver rooms in the SEC. Graham Mertz was really solid last year. Your offensive line could be decent. But it's just, I don't have a lot of faith in Billy Napier. He's still calling the plays, which has been the biggest criticism that Gator fans have had of Billy Napier. His play calling is too conservative. It's not really that innovative. His late game decision making and clock management is really questionable. I just don't see it with Florida this year with Billy Napier. I see them in the market for another head coach at the end of this season. I don't care how good he's recruiting. When you're at a school like Florida, it's not hard for you to recruit at a high level. Even Dan Mullen was bringing in pretty decent recruiting classes, and the recruiting classes that Billy Napier has brought in compared to Dan Mullen, there's not really a big difference. They're around the same range. It's just that a lot of Dan Mullen's guys weren't sticking with the program. But with Billy Napier's guys, how many of these dudes are developing and becoming high-level players for Florida? You know, you got to ask yourself that. So Florida, I have them at number 13. At number 12, we got South Carolina. The Beamer boys are coming off the worst season under Shane Beamer. They were a complete shit show on offense. They had no offensive line help for Spencer Rattler. Anytime he dropped back to throw, he was running for his life back there. Your wide receiving core wasn't that deep. And even this season, your wide receiving core still isn't that deep. But you do have one guy that I'm really intrigued in. That's Nick Harbor, who is going viral on social media because he potentially could be participating in the Summer Olympics. This dude has insane size. He's like 240-something pounds. He's built like DK Metcalf, and they say he could be faster than Tyreek Hill, which is absolutely scary. You got Lenore Sellers, who is another athletic freak. He's like 240-something pounds at 6'3", 6'4", playing quarterback. He has a gigantic arm. You talk about Joe Milton's arm strength. Lenore Sellers says, hold my beer. Really good touch on his deep ball. And South Carolina is bringing in one of the best defenses that they've had in the last couple of years. And this is easily the most talented defense that Shane Beamer has had in his couple of years with that program. That coaching staff, they feel really good about what they have on that defensive line and at linebacker. Not only do they feel good about their starters at those positions, but they also feel insanely confident about the depth that they have behind those guys. And your secondary should be pretty decent too. South Carolina is a sleeper team, a true sleeper team, and the most stacked conference in the SEC. There aren't too many sleeper teams in this conference this year, but if there was a team that could surprise some people and randomly just win 8-9 games, it definitely is South Carolina. I believe in Lenore Sellers. I think that offensive line can finally play at a serviceable level for the first time ever under Shane Beamer. South Carolina, don't sleep on the Beamer boys in 2024 because they definitely can surprise some people. Auburn comes in at number 11. I wanted to put them higher. I don't have them this low because I think they're bad. I have them this low because there's not a big difference between this year's Auburn team versus last year's Auburn team. The ceiling for Auburn last year was 7-8 wins. The ceiling for Auburn this year is probably 7 wins max. They got a mix of experience, but also a lot of young talent that they're going to be relying on. They got a true freshman wide receiver in Cam Coleman who they're expecting to come in and be dominant as their number one wideout right away. You got Peyton Thorne coming back at quarterback. It's just, Auburn isn't a bad team. It's just, they're a solid team in a stacked conference. So how higher, if you're an Auburn fan that's upset and you're throwing your middle finger at me through the screen, how higher would you put Auburn at? Would you put them over any other team that I have above you? I really don't know. It's like you, under Hugh Freeze, are definitely one of those teams that you just can't judge strictly based on talent. But at the same time, when you're playing in the toughest conference in America, relying on a couple of true freshmen and, a few experienced guys is going to get you far. I just think that Auburn is a year or two away from being a legitimate contender in the SEC. I can see them winning 6 games, but, we saw Auburn win 6 games last year. I really don't see too much changing between Auburn from 2024 from last year. Number 10, I got Kentucky. Kentucky is a team that you talk about somebody who could surprise some people who we could see in Atlanta this year when nobody expects it. Kentucky's one of those teams. They got a really good defensive line, one of the best defensive lines in college football. A lot of production, a lot of experience on that unit. They're going to have a pretty good secondary. This is the most talented Kentucky team that they've had in recent memory. If you just talk about Kentucky from a pure talent standpoint, a lot of these dudes they recruited aren't your typical 3-star, 2-star guys that you think of when it comes to Kentucky football. Like, they got a lot of blue chippers on that squad this year, especially on offense. I love their wide receiving core. That's why I bought into the hype with the dude they had last year and Devin Leary. I thought that Kentucky was going to win 9 games last year because Berrien Brown, Dane Key, I think are 2 of the most criminally underrated wide receivers in the SEC. And that's why I thought Kentucky could have exploded last year, but they were held back by disappointing quarterback play. Because I don't think anybody expected Devin Leary to play like that. You got Brock Vandagriff there at QB, who you got via the portal from Georgia. If he ends up being as good as expected, with how good that offensive line is, with how good these receivers are, and how good this defense could be, watch out for Big Blue in 2024. I'm trying to tell y'all guys, like, you talk about a team that could make it to Atlanta out of nowhere. Kentucky definitely has that kind of squad. And Kentucky is one of those teams that they're due for a 10-win season every 4 years. And it's been a while since they had their last 10-win season. With the squad they have this year, this could be one of those years that Kentucky just blows up. At number 9, we got Missouri. I know you guys finna say, JT, you tripping. You sleeping on Missouri like this? Yes, I am. You got to show me this year. Missouri had a fantastic season last year, not taking anything away from them. But the SEC in 2024 is way more competitive than what it was in 2023. Okay, they lost their defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, to LSU, one of the best defensive coordinators in the nation. They also lose a good amount of talent on defense as well. Now, they've brought in some pretty suitable replacements from the portal, and they do pretty much bring back everybody except Cody Schrader at running back. They got Luther Burden, the best receiver in college football. You got a pretty good offensive line. I just see Missouri coming back a little bit down to earth. I'm not saying they're going to be terrible. They're going to be average. I see them being a 9-win team. But I just can't see them making it to the SEC championship. I don't care how easy their schedule is. They're due for at least 2-3 losses. There were a couple of games that they should have lost last year that they were able to sneak by. If my memory serves me correctly, didn't they barely escape beating Florida last year? And Brady Cook is not that good. He easily, to me, is the second most overrated quarterback in America, right behind DJ Uiagalelei. I'm sorry. Eli Drinkwitz proved me wrong last year. He got to prove me wrong again. If you're a Missouri fan and you want to call me a hater, just go ahead. But I just got to see it again for me to believe the hype. I think that too many people are living in a recency bias when it comes to y'all. And Tennessee and Oklahoma, there are so many teams that are better than you from a talent standpoint and could be better than you this season. Texas A&M, you got Mike Elko. You talk about somebody who did more with less. When Duke beat Clemson last year, that was one of the biggest surprises of the college football season last year. And not just did they beat Duke or beat Clemson, but they manhandled Clemson. They blew those boys out. You would have thought that Duke was a former national championship winner and not Clemson with the way that game panned out. Now, injuries derailed the season, but for them to get Mike Elko was a huge pickup because Mike Elko is one of the better coaches in college football. Is he in that Kalen DeBoer category? Definitely not, but he's a top 25 coach. And he's inheriting a really talented team. They did lose a few guys from the portal, but they brought in a top 5 portal class, I believe. I believe their portal class was 4th or 5th. I don't got the numbers in front of me right now, but they got a really good team this year. You got Connor Wigman coming back at quarterback. He got his season cut short last year. That was one of the main catalysts for the Aggie season being a disaster in 2023. I feel really good about Texas A&M this season. They could be a team that potentially could make it to the playoffs, and there are a lot of Texas A&M fans that would tell you this could be a top 5 defense this year. So Texas A&M comes in at number 8, and all these teams from 10 and up are good enough to make it to the playoffs. That's how deep the SEC is. There are 10 teams that are playoff caliber, even Kentucky. LSU comes in at number 7. Is LSU too low? I'm going to disagree with anybody that feels otherwise. If you feel LSU should be higher, you're basically telling me their defense is going to be tremendously improved from how they played last year. Last year was the worst defense in LSU program history. They bring in an entirely new coaching staff. They got now one of the best defensive coaching staffs in America. Blake Baker calling your defense. You got Bo Davis as your defensive lines coach. But that coaching is really going to have to pay dividends year one for LSU on that defensive staff because they didn't really get a lot of help in the portal. And Brian Kelly hasn't really been that good when it comes to utilizing the portal because he brought in a big portal class last year, and I don't think too many of those guys panned out because they're still at the well trying to figure it out. Do they have talent on that side? Yes, but just because you got a lot of blue chip 5 and 4 star guys doesn't mean all these guys can play at a high level, because if that was the case, your defense wouldn't have been as bad as what it was last year. LSU fans are going to tell you, man, we bring back so much production on that side. Yes, you do, but this is the same production that contributed to the worst defense you've ever had. So is this good production that you're bringing back, or are these guys that you bring back that still can't play at a high level? Coaching can only fix up so many issues, and that defense will improve, but I still think it's going to be tough sledding for LSU this year. I think they're going to be all offense and no defense this year. Although their defense won't be historically bad, I still think having a 70, 80th ranked defense isn't going to be good enough to cut it. That's why I have them at number 7. Plus, Brian Kelly is a little bit overrated to me. Number 6, we got the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee had a down year last year. All right. Joe Milton was pretty good, but not great. Your wide receiver core got devastated with injuries. Brett McCoy got injured. You had Deontay Thornton, the transfer you got last year from Oregon. I believe he got banged up as well. This year, your receiving core comes back fully intact. And also, you get a lot deeper. You got a really good transfer from Tulane, who was going off in the spring game. You returned 3 out of 5 starters on the offensive line. You also got one of the best offensive tackles from the portal who came from LSU. I think his name is Lance Hurd. Don't quote me on that. Don't get mad at me for not knowing all these guys' names. Like, do you guys not know how many people are coming in and out of the transfer portal? Like, you can take all the notes in the world all you want to, but you try keeping up with all these 400 and 500 guys transferring teams going in and out of the portal and think that you ain't going to miss up on a couple of names here and there. But their defense is really underrated. And what's crazy about Tennessee is how people view them as a finesse team. When you think of Tennessee, you think of a team that just wants to throw it all over the field against you. But last season, they were easily one of the 3 most physical teams in this conference. And it's evident because this year, they got arguably the best defensive line in the nation, with one of their best players on their defensive line currently being expected to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. You're going to be good on the offensive and defensive line. Your secondary, it may not be that good, but if you got a defensive line that can get after the quarterback, it helps out a questionable secondary because those guys aren't going to be in coverage for that long. And I love Josh Heupel. I was never a big fan when they made the decision to hire him because they had got the AD from UCF, and he brought in Josh Heupel from UCF, and I didn't really see it with Josh Heupel, but this dude has proven me wrong. And ever since that 2022 season, I low-key have found myself rooting for the Tennessee Vols. And I may just be a tad bit biased because Tennessee has given me some of my best memories as a college football fan, just thinking of the nostalgia. And I just was a big fan of Joshua Dobbs and Hendon Hooker. I still will never get over how that 2022 season ended. Y'all got to get revenge for that 2022 season. I believe you get it this year. You can definitely be a playoff team, and you definitely have way than a better chance of being able to make it to the SEC title game this season. You got Nico Imaviava coming in, replacing Joe Milton at quarterback, highly sought after guy from the recruiting class that Arch Manning was in. Did you know they brought Nico Imaviava in on the official visit on a private jet? You got to be official if you getting flown out on a recruiting visit on a private jet. And he looked really good against Iowa. And I'm not trying to say he's the next Trevor Lawrence, but when I watch him play, he definitely does have a lot of similarities to his skill set. You know, he's long, tall, and lanky. Kind of has a similar running style to Trevor Lawrence, but way more athletic, way more physical. He's beefed up in the weight room. I can't wait to watch Nico Imaviava play this year. And I'm not just saying that because I think I finally learned how to pronounce his name, but this dude is a dark horse Heisman contender. And Tennessee is a dark horse national championship contender. You're going to be good on the O-line. You're going to have arguably the best D-line in America. That's the perfect recipe for a championship team right there. Now we get into the top 5. And boy, I know a lot of y'all not about to agree with me on this one, but the Oklahoma Sooners, man, this is the most underrated team, not just in the SEC, but in all of college football going into this year, man. Like, there are so many of you guys who are sleeping on Oklahoma. They have one of the best defenses in the nation coming into this year. They return a lot of production, and I don't think a lot of you guys know just how truly deep Oklahoma is on that defensive end. Their secondary is like 2-3 guys deep. They were fantastic when it came to forcing turnovers. They also have really good corners. The Achilles heel of Oklahoma under Brent Venables, his first couple of years down there in Norman, has been their defensive line play. They haven't really been that good against the run, and they haven't been able to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. A lot of that's going to change. They got a really good transfer from the MAC. You also got Dominic Williams, the defensive tackle that LSU wanted out of TCU. Oklahoma ended up outbidding them for his services. Brian Kelly was really upset about it. Oklahoma's defense is going to legitimately be a top 3 defense in this conference. Arguably, it could be the best. And they're going to have one of the best defenses in America. This is going to be the first year we truly see that Brent Venables' aggressive physical defense that we were so accustomed to seeing when he was the defensive coordinator for all those years under Dabo Swinney at Clemson. The only thing that could keep Oklahoma from making it to the SEC championship is their new offensive coordinator who's going to be replacing Jeff Labby. And Jackson Arnold disappoints. Jackson Arnold was highly sought after. He had an up and down debut against Arizona in their bowl game. He struggled in the first quarter. Then in the second and third quarter, he was absolutely on fire. He was making big play with his legs. He was getting outside the pocket. He threw a nice pass in the back of the end zone in the red zone. Oklahoma has a really good group of wide receivers. They got a running back that I really love who has a fun name to pronounce, Gavin Sawchuk. And this Gavin Sawchuk dude, he was going crazy the last month of last regular season, man. I mean, you talk about somebody who was on an absolute tear. Do your homework on Gavin Sawchuk. Like, Oklahoma has some damn talent on this year's team. The only thing that could derail Oklahoma this year is just Jackson Arnold not living up to expectations. Now, the offensive line also is a little bit of a question too, but I definitely expect for that to be fixed this year. With the talent they got at wide receiver, at running back, and them having an elite defense going into this season, Oklahoma has the perfect recipe to be a shocking team that could make it to Atlanta. At number 4, I got Ole Miss. We know Ole Miss has a great offense. All right, they return Jackson Dart. You got a lot of talent on the wide receiver position. Well, you got a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. You lost Quinshawn Judkins, but useless wasn't too bad. You also got another running back that you stole from Colorado or you flipped from the portal. Your offensive line is going to be really good. The question is, are you going to have a damn defense this year? Pete Golding isn't a good defensive coordinator, but they did go really heavy in the portal on trying to overhaul the defense side of football. They got a lot of guys from the portal on defense that were top 100 rated players or better. So when you think about Ole Miss this season, you could see this being a complete all-around team. And they're a hot dark horse pick to win this conference outside of Georgia and Texas. A lot of people could see Ole Miss winning this conference this year, considering how favorable their schedule is and how stacked they are. This Ole Miss team is exactly similar to last year's FSU's team. They don't recruit at the highest level, but they recruit at a good enough level where not Lincoln Riley, but Lane Kiffin has done a good job of mixing the recruiting in with utilizing the transfer portal and developing some of those transfer portal guys as well. Ole Miss could truly be not just a potential team that wins the SEC this year, but they could win it all this season. Texas comes in at number 3. I'm not low on Steve Sarkisian. I do think that he is a really good head coach. As a matter of fact, he's one of my favorite head coaches in college football. Texas is getting a step up in competition. You know, they're going to have some pretty tough games. You got to play Georgia at home. But I do think that at worst, they'll be a 9-win team. I think their ceiling is 11, 12 wins potentially because, they got deep pockets down there in Austin. So they can pretty much buy anybody they need from the portal to fix any position that they have holes at. You got Isaiah Bond from Alabama, who was their most productive wide receiver outside of Jermaine Burton. You're going to have a really good offensive line. Quinn Ewers is coming back for his final season. This should be the best of Quinn Ewers that we've seen his last couple of years down there. Your defense, how's that secondary going to look? And how are you going to look on the interior of your defensive line, replacing 2 NFL studs or 2 guys that are going to end up being studs at the next level, and Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy? So Texas, I think they're the 3rd best team in the SEC going into this year. At number 2, I got the Tide. Man, I might as well become an Alabama fan at this point because I talk about them so much. Only because Kalen DeBoer is my favorite coach in college football. I've been watching this dude ever since Pac-12 After Dark, his first year at Washington. I love this dude. He's a winner. He's won everywhere he's been. He was winning national championships for his alma mater at NAIA and Sioux Falls. He turned around Washington and only 2 years took them to a national championship. Did more with Chris Peterson's squad than what Chris Peterson did with that team that he recruited. Imagine what Kalen DeBoer could do year 1 at Alabama with the kind of talent that the Tide have. And Alabama, we seem to forget that even though they did lose a good amount to the portal and to the NFL, they've recruited at a top 3, top 5 level the last couple of years under Nick Saban. And a lot of those guys are still there. It's not like the whole entire roster end up leaving and going for greener pastures. And Kalen DeBoer, to me, is the 2nd best head coach in college football. I think he's Nick Saban reincarnated. That may be a bold take. I know a lot of people are going to say, whoa. Slow your brakes, JT. You show me another head coach that has done more with less than what Kalen DeBoer has done. And at number 1, I got the Dogs. Listen, man, Kirby Smart, he's not my 2nd favorite head coach in college football. I listened to his epic national championship pregame speech every single day when I wake up. You know, it gets me fired up. It gets me going. Georgia has a lot of talent coming back on both offense and defense. You got Carson Beck, debatably the best quarterback in college football, depending on who you ask. You always know that they're going to be really good on the offensive line. Their defensive line play should be pretty good as well, even though they may not be as good at that position as what they've been in years past. This is the favorite to win the SEC this year. They're the odds-on favorite to win it all this year, and they got to go on the road to play Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss. All three of these teams I have in my top 4 who are ranked behind Georgia. And it's just hard to see them going undefeated this year. I at least could see them having 1 or 2 losses, but they still can end up winning the Natty just because the college football playoffs expanding to 12 teams is going to make it a lot easier for Georgia to overcome those losses and still be able to get to that championship game. So this is my 2024 SEC preseason power rankings. Every SEC team ranked from worst to best. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Who's too low? Who's too high? Who did I get right?